Four Israeli soldiers have been killed and 10 others were hurt inside of Israel by a Hamas rocket attack from Rafah. To chat about this in more detail is our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari, who joins us once again from Los Angeles. Lisa, I was looking at the ages of the soldiers killed. Sergeant Michael Rizal was just 18. Staff Sergeant Ruben Mordecai was 19 years of age. Staff Sergeant Ido Testa was 19. And Staff Sergeant Tal Shavit was just 21. Lisa, these soldiers were just kids.
Just kids. I mean, that is, the age of the draft in Israel. You also have a lot of um, soldiers in their 20s, 30s, 40s that are leaving their families behind, families with 3 and 4 kids where their fathers are not coming back home. Look, there's a lot of senseless lives that are loss of life, I should say, in this war, as we all know it. But I want to point to something else here. What you mentioned about Rafah now attacking Israel, underscoring the point that if Israel does not enter Rafah, if Rafah will come to Israel, and that's exactly what we're seeing here. This is a disease. This is an existential threat that cannot be diminished, that cannot be understated. Also, we see a lot of the death toll. We see a lot of the bloodshed. I want to remind people there are urban war experts. One that I frequently cite is John Spencer. He is an actual urban war expert. That is what he spends his life doing, is studying different urban warfare, different examples. And he has published many times that what Israel is doing was unprecedented and should be the example going forward. And that's not what you're hearing on college campuses. That's not what you're hearing from the mainstream media. That's not what you're hearing from college professors. And the average person doesn't realize, because of all the propaganda that is going around, how careful the IDF is trying to be. Now, is there a high death toll? Absolutely. But they are being so careful. And he actually cites how the United States in Iraq, the United States in Afghanistan was not as careful, where the death toll was much higher. And you didn't see this kind of outrage throughout the world. So the point being, of course, we don't want to see any death toll anywhere, any war. But the fact of the matter is that this is an existential threat that Israel is fighting. Many young Israelis dying also in this senseless war. We all want to rid the world of radicalism, and of course, it's popping up here in our own backyards. So it's something that I think we have to take a bigger look at and unite behind the bigger threat here, which is, again, radicalism.
Let's talk about another one of the wars that Israel is fighting right now, Lisa. The Israel Defense Forces say the terror group Hezbollah, meanwhile, has been launching more than 60 rockets in northern Israel over the weekend, injuring a man and causing major damage to a number of homes and cars.
Yeah, they have evacuated the northern part of Israel because of this threat. I spoke to a few IDF soldiers over the weekend, actually, and when they talk about the threat from Lebanon, from Hezbollah, they talk about it as a matter of when, not if. So they know that that front is coming in a more escalated fashion. They know that it's going to, it's Iran's regime that is pulling the puppet string. So I think they want to tire out the IDF on Gaza and Rafah, and then begin that front, hoping to exhaust Israel's capabilities to stop these threats. Now the issue then becomes, this is a much larger threat that is looming. Hezbollah being the best endowed terror proxy that the Iran regime has. They have over, I believe, 150,000 missiles that are pointed towards Israel and can get deeper into Israel than Hamas can. So again, a matter of when and not if, and Israel is bracing itself for when that front begins in a more escalated way.
Let's circle back to Hamas for just a moment here, Lisa. The U.S. State Department is accusing the terrorist group of stealing Gaza aid in a shipment meant for the Palestinian people. And apparently, this is not the first time. Last month, the Palestinian authorities Auda TV accused Hamas officials of repeatedly stealing deliveries and even killing those assigned to the distribution of the cargo.
Yeah, thank you for underscoring this, Hal, because this is something that people don't want to hear. They want to blame the UN, the United States, Israel mainly, for the Gazan people starving, not getting their aid, not getting the proper, basic goods that is coming to them. And of course, as you know, right now, there has been a doubling down of that effort to get the aid to them. And look what happens. Hamas, again, is intercepting that aid. This is something that was going on even before October 7th. And I want people to remember that before October 7th, you would find here and there very brave Palestinians who would speak out against Hamas, who were protesting against Hamas. Look, is it punishable by death? Absolutely. They'll come after you if you speak out against Hamas. But the point being that there was that disenchantment, there was this abuse of the Palestinian people, and continues to be because they're putting them in harm's way, right? What leadership would put their own people where there are weapons, where it becomes a war zone, and hide weapons in schools and mosques and hospitals, creating these elaborate tunnel systems, having people hide these hostages in their homes? It's an issue. On the other hand, you know that the Palestinian people have rallied around Hamas more since October 7th, because anti-Semitism, I guess, gets people to rally around the flag a bit more. But the bottom line is, if you want better for the Palestinian people, if you want them to get their aid, look at their rich leaders living in Qatar, living in Turkey, taking the aid and intercepting it. I mean, these are the main issues that the global community doesn't speak about when they want to talk about the plight of the Palestinian people.
Now, speaking of Qatar, a government official there says his government is considering closing down Hamas offices that are currently operating in his country. The Persian Gulf nation, Lisa, is apparently re-examining its relationship with the Gaza-based terrorist organization as it reviews its role as mediator in the now 7-month-long war between Israel and Hamas.
Yeah, well, finally, right? I mean, Qatar has been playing both sides for a very long time, and the West has been okay with it. So, on the one hand, they're mediators. They're trying to get the hostages out. They're trying to play both sides, speaking to Hamas, speaking to Israel, and trying to be the middleman there. On the other hand, we know that they are housing the Hamas leaders and actually have given them money year after year, contributing to Hamas. I mean, how can that be where you're not impartial when you're giving money to one group, right? I think there's going to be maybe more conditions as to having to kick out a lot of these, or not allow Qatar to become the hub, the headquarters for Hamas for much longer. And we shall see if they're actually going to be honest about, kicking them out. On the other hand, we also know that there's Qatari money coming into our universities here in the United States. Their influence is growing. So they want to have a hand in that Western, to influence, Western ideology, but also giving money to the radicals. So we have to be really careful about this quote unquote honest broker that we have employed to be the middleman here. And I think that the United States and the West has to put more pressure on Qatar to be more transparent about its actions.
Okay, let's talk about a lot of the protests taking place at a number of university and college campuses, both here in Canada and where you are in the United States. And it turns out these rallies are more than just protests, Lisa. Police in New York say many of the protesters at Columbia University had weapons on them, including knives and hammers, along with a pamphlet, "Death to America," written on them.
Yes, this is an absolute sophisticated operation. Many things we want to point out here. First, as you said, carrying weapons, being well prepared. There has been paraphernalia and really literature found, like booklets and pamphlets and flyers with a course of action. I have seen myself digital files about, this is what you do if you get arrested. This is what you say. This is how you come. This is how you prepare. This is what you carry with you, et cetera, et cetera. Really very, very well organized, well funded. We have to look at where this money is coming from. I know a lot of investigative journalists, including myself, are really digging into this, and we have been for years. This is not just something that is newer. And really, a lot of these agitators, as they call them, are not students. What are they doing on private university campuses, causing and fomenting and organizing these types of protests? A lot of them are 40 and 50 years old. They are career agitators or protesters or activists, whatever they want to call themselves, leading many to look at who is paying these agitators, these professional protesters, from being on campus. A lot of people have pointed to the fact that all the tents look alike; they're the same color. So there was, orders put in. At UCLA, there was plywood put around, there was fencing put around the encampment. They were wearing hard hats to protect themselves. They had tools and flashlights. All, basically a big shipment came from some sort of store. And again, looking at where this is coming from, who is funding this, who is agitating, and to really put a stop to it. This is not just, I should say, not that it's not just, it has very little to do with Palestine and Israel. It has much more to do with, rooting out, American, pro-American sentiments on campus. It's very, very pro-radical and anti-American, and that's why, a lot of people are paying attention to this right now.
You know, and police in New York are also investigating a number of bomb threats made against Jewish synagogues there. We continue to see anti-Semitism rates just climb just about everywhere.
Yeah, Hal, it's crazy. If this was against any other group, we've given this example many times over the last 2 weeks. Imagine if there was an encampment about, KKK. How many minutes would it take to take down that encampment? Let alone, over a week that these encampments were up, the signs were up, there's still graffiti up around these campuses. Graduations being canceled. Hal, this is the same class that had their high school graduation canceled from COVID. This is the parents' first chance to sit and watch their children come down in their gowns at graduation, and they're canceled because of this nonsense, because of this ideology, and because of the graduations we have seen where disruptors have completely ruined the experience for everyone. Of course, synagogues now being threatened as well. That's something that it goes back to the old playbook of threatening places where Jews worship, going also to churches. I know that it's not Jews alone, but those who support them and are their partners in this endeavor to really fight off this threat against the Judeo-Christian culture of America.
You know, the war in Ukraine continues, Lisa, and the Biden administration recently sent more than $1 billion in military aid. But apparently, many of the weapons are not up to par and had to be thrown out.
Right. But where do those weapons end up is the question, right? How this is something that we knew was happening, obviously. Even the good weapons, even some of the good aid, where is that ending up? That is something that is usually the side effect of any sort of situation like this, when the United States provides weapons and then you see it, for sale on WhatsApp and Telegram. In this case, there is much less oversight. And for that reason, we're seeing much more of that fraud and abuse and really stealing of a lot of the weapons and the aid. So unfortunately, this is something that I don't think they can put a number on it, although they have put the $1 million, mark on it. I actually would think that it's more than that with all the aid and weapons that have gone into Ukraine. But the sooner this war is over, the sooner we do away with a lot of different threats that we're facing right now.
So where's the off-ramp for both Putin and Zelensky here?
Right, great
Is there
question.
one?
Now that the weapons are basically done and the West is basically done with its share of supporting this war, what will happen? I mean, on the one hand, Russia is touting more victories. Zelensky, on the other hand, says we're still here. And look, to his point, it is crazy that they have been able to hang on for this long. The main issue for the West is not to give Putin a win, not necessarily about Ukraine, but to not allow him to, amass more territory, have this more confidence and believe that this is okay. And for that reason, I think there will be some more stepping up, in terms of giving them more aid and supporting them. But to what end? Are we just dragging this out further and having more things like this happen where weapons are ending up in the wrong hands? You have a migrant crisis again. You have, people displaced from their homes. You have young women, children, families, etc., that are on the go and being, driven out from their homes. So yeah, what is the off ramp, and how will this end in a way where Putin is not emboldened? You have, fewer casualties, and again, we put an end to this as soon as possible. Those are the main points here, and the priorities that the West has in looking at this
Yeah,
war.
praying for peace not only in Ukraine but also in the Middle East as well. Lisa, big surprise a little closer to home in the Donald Trump's hush money trial. Special counsel Jack Smith's team admitted that key evidence in the criminal case were altered or manipulated since they were seized by the FBI, and the prosecutors misled the court about it for a period of time. So what will this mean for former President Trump?
Who knows what it means? How it is crazy to think how much comes out in terms of, like you said, evidence was tampered. Different, different individuals playing roles that have, that have not been transparent. That, there's so many developments that come up. But this morning, the judge said, you know what, we're probably looking at jail time for Donald Trump because the fines are just not cutting it. What does that mean? Right? This is what everyone was basically predicting would happen, because they just want to do away with Donald Trump and not allow him to be a candidate in the upcoming presidential election here in the United States. I mean, anything is possible. I mean, week to week, Hal, when we discuss it on this show, I think there's new developments, and really anything can happen. And then really that's the scary part, that the due process, that all Americans are afforded is a little bit flexible in this case for some reason, and we know what that reason is. So
So if Trump
um,
ends up in cell block D, does that mean that maybe Nikki Haley will throw her hat back in the ring?
let's see. I mean, that totally might be the case, and I don't know if it would be, Nikki Haley, or if protests would erupt because Donald Trump is so popular. I can't imagine that his followers would really accept this kind of development. I think the punishment has to fit the crime, right? So let's hope that that's the way this trial moves forward.
Political reporter and foreign affairs expert Lisa Daftari, thanks so much for joining us today from Los Angeles.
My pleasure.